Every military analyst in Washington had concluded that the Strait of Hormuz was entering a period of managed tension. However, on the morning of March 18, 2026, two U.S. Air Force F-15EX Eagle II fighter jets did something in those waters that no Western nation had dared to do in over a decade, and the reverberations reached from Tehran to Beijing before the sun had set on the Persian Gulf. What you witnessed in those 27 minutes was not a skirmish, it was not a provocation. It was the opening move of a strategic recalculation so profound that it may redraw the entire architecture of Middle Eastern power before the year is out. Iran had spent 3 years engineering a new kind of dominance over the world's most important waterway. The United States just dismantled it in less than half an hour. The world is still processing what that means. The images you are about to see on your screens were captured by military surveillance assets, open-source intelligence analysts, and commercial satellite platforms operating over the Persian Gulf on that morning. What you see is not a routine patrol. What you see is not an exercise. The footage documents a precision operation conducted at the intersection of the world's most volatile geography, a 21-mile-wide channel through which 17 million barrels of oil flow every single day. But that is not the most shocking detail. There are two factors that made this operation different from every prior U.S. military action in the region. We will explain both in the later parts of this video. For now, we must descend to the moment when it all began. The location is the northern approach to the Strait of Hormuz, approximately 40 kilometers southwest of Bandar Abbas, Iran's primary naval base on the Gulf coastline. The date is March 18, 2026. The time is 0447 local. According to preliminary assessments reviewed by the Institute for the Study of War and corroborated by U.S. Central Command's public statement released 72 hours after the event, Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy fast attack craft had been conducting a systematic harassment campaign against commercial tanker traffic for 11 consecutive days prior to the operation. The IRGCN had deployed a pattern involving 3 to 5 Hudong-class missile boats operating in coordinated interdiction formations, blocking or shadow-following vessels flagged to NATO allied nations. On March 17th, the IRGCN had briefly seized and then released a Marshall Islands-flagged supertanker, the MV Cerulean Star, carrying 220,000 metric tons of Saudi crude bound for Rotterdam. That was the line that broke the calculation. The F-15EX Eagle II is not the aircraft most people picture when they imagine American air power in the Persian Gulf. It is not the stealth-optimized F-22. It is not the multi-role F-35. The Eagle II is something far more specific and far more deliberate. According to U.S. Air Force acquisition records and Boeing's published specifications, the F-15EX carries the Advanced Display Core Processor II, giving it the most sophisticated electronic warfare suite ever installed on a legacy airframe. Its maximum payload capacity reaches 29,000 pounds of ordnance, more than any other tactical fighter in the American inventory. Crucially, it carries the Eagle Passive Active Warning Survivability System, or APKWS, which allows it to detect, track, and electronically suppress Iranian Bavar 373 surface-to-air missile batteries without emitting a detectable radar signature of its own. The choice of the F-15EX over the F-35 was not an accident. It was a message delivered in metal and avionics. Iran's most advanced air defense architecture was being told, in the language of hardware selection, that the United States considered it insufficient to require stealth. The two aircraft, operating under call signs Javelin 1 and Javelin 2, had launched from Al Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates at 0411 local time. Flight time to the northern Hormuz approach corridor at the F-15EX's combat cruise speed of Mach 0.9 is approximately 23 minutes. The aircraft were not alone. Supporting the operation were two EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft operating from the USS Harry S. Truman Carrier Strike Group, positioned 140 kilometers to the southeast in the Gulf of Oman. The Growler's role was suppression of enemy air defenses, specifically the Iranian Sayyad 4B radar network that strings along the coastline from Keshem Island to the Makran coast. According to Naval Institute analysis published in February 2026, the Sayyad 4B network had been upgraded with Chinese-origin passive radar components in late 2025, giving it a theoretical capability against low observable targets. The Growlers neutralized that capability before Javelin 1 and Javelin 2 reached Iranian sensor range. What Iran's radar operators saw was static. What arrived in the strait was something they could not prepare for. This is where things get genuinely extraordinary. The operation did not target Iranian ships. It targeted infrastructure. According to CENTCOM's official statement and corroborated by satellite imagery analyzed by CSIS and the Middlebury Institute, the F-15EX aircraft deployed AGM-158C long-range anti-ship missiles against two specific targets: the IRGCN forward operating base on Abu Musa Island, which Iranian forces had illegally occupied and militarized since 1992, and the mobile anti-ship missile battery Iran had positioned on the island's eastern coastline just 11 days earlier. The Abu Musa battery was equipped with Noor anti-ship missiles, the Iranian domestically produced variant of China's C-802, with a stated range of 170 kilometers and a CEP of approximately 5 meters. Positioned on Abu Musa, those missiles could strike any commercial vessel transiting the strait without warning. The El Rasim strikes eliminated both the operating base fuel depot and the Noor battery launcher systems from a standoff range that kept both F-15EX aircraft entirely outside Iranian airspace. The entire kinetic phase lasted 11 minutes. And then, because this is where the second factor enters the story, something happened that no one in Tehran had anticipated. The strategic implication of those 11 minutes extends far beyond the destruction of two Iranian military installations. The Abu Musa battery had represented Iran's crown jewel in its anti-access area denial strategy for the strait. According to analysis published by the International Institute for Strategic Studies in January 2026, Iran had invested an estimated $400 million over the preceding 4 years in precisely this kind of layered A2AD architecture: forward-positioned anti-ship systems, distributed drone swarm platforms, and hardened naval base infrastructure designed to make any Western attempt to contest Iranian harassment too costly to execute. The destruction of the Abu Musa battery in 11 minutes from aircraft that never entered Iranian airspace did not merely eliminate a weapon system. It invalidated the entire strategic theory on which $400 million of Iranian defense investment rested. That is not a tactical setback. That is a strategic collapse. But that is not the most shocking detail. The second factor that made this operation categorically different from any previous American military action in the region was what happened in the 48 hours after the strikes. Iran did not respond. Not with missiles, not with drone swarms, not with naval interdiction, not with the mine-laying operations that IRGCN doctrine prescribes as a first-tier retaliation against perceived aggression in the strait. Tehran issued a statement through the Iranian Foreign Ministry condemning the strikes as, in their words, a blatant violation of sovereign territorial claims, but the IRGCN fast attack craft that had spent 11 days harassing tanker traffic had, by March 19th, returned to port. The MV Cerulean Star completed its transit without incident. 7 other commercial vessels that had been either shadowed or blocked in the preceding week transited freely on March 18th and 19th. Iran's maritime coercion campaign, which had been operating continuously since March 7th, ceased within hours of the F-15EX strikes. The silence from Tehran, in this context, was louder than any counterstrike could have been. Now we must lift the camera from the strait itself and look at what this operation reveals about the broader geopolitical architecture that has been quietly shifting for the past 18 months. The Strait of Hormuz is not merely a geographic choke point. It is the physical embodiment of global energy security. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, approximately 20% of the world's total petroleum liquids and liquefied natural gas passes through those 21 miles of water every day. When Iran harasses tanker traffic in the strait, the consequence is not confined to the vessels being shadowed. Within 48 hours of the MV Cerulean Star seizure, Brent crude futures had risen $4.20 per barrel on the ICE exchange. European natural gas spot prices had moved 6%. The economic weapon Iran had been wielding was not abstract. It was priced in energy bills across Germany, Poland, and Japan. The F-15EX operation on March 18th was, in the language of energy markets, a rate cut announcement. By March 20th, Brent had surrendered the entirety of its post-seizure premium. The operation also carries profound implications for the emerging security architecture in the Gulf itself. The Abraham Accords framework, fragile as it remains, had been under severe strain from Iranian maritime coercion. According to diplomatic reporting from Reuters and the Financial Times, Saudi Arabia had privately communicated to the Biden and subsequently the Trump administrations through back-channel mechanisms that continued Iranian harassment without a Western response, was making domestic political justification for the normalization track increasingly difficult. The Gulf Cooperation Council states, particularly the UAE and Bahrain, had been watching the 11-day harassment campaign with what multiple Gulf diplomatic sources described to Politico as deep alarm. The F-15EX operation provided those states with something they had not received in 3 years of IRGCN escalation: demonstrable proof that the American security umbrella remained operational. That proof does not come in the form of diplomatic communiques. It comes in the form of AGM-158C impact craters on Abu Musa Island. We must now look at the human reality inside the machinery that executed this operation and the one that absorbed it. The pilot of Javelin 1, whose identity has not been publicly released but whose unit, the 58th Fighter Squadron based at Eglin Air Force Base, has been confirmed by Air Force Times, had conducted 6 prior deployments to the Central Command area of operations. The man behind the controls of the most capable non-stealth fighter aircraft on Earth, threading a precision strike through the electronic signature of an active Iranian air defense network in the pre-dawn darkness over the Persian Gulf, was not executing an impulsive escalation. He was executing a plan that, according to defense officials cited by the Wall Street Journal, had been in preparation since January 2026. The target packages had been validated. The electronic warfare coordination had been rehearsed. The decision to act had been considered at the highest levels of the National Security Council. What looked from the outside like a sudden shock was in fact the visible end of a long, careful preparation. Inside Tehran, the picture that emerges from Iranian state media analysis and the assessments of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies is one of an IRGCN leadership caught between institutional pride and strategic reality. The IRGCN had built its identity around the concept of asymmetric deterrence, the ability to threaten catastrophic disruption of global oil markets as leverage against Western pressure. The Abu Musa battery was not merely a weapons system, it was a symbol of that deterrent posture. Its destruction in 11 minutes forced a choice between retaliation, which carried the risk of escalation to a conflict Iran cannot sustain economically, and silence, which meant accepting that the deterrent posture had been exposed as insufficient. Tehran chose silence. That choice, as much as the strikes themselves, will be studied in military academies for the next 20 years. The coming weeks will determine whether March 18th was an inflection point or an anomaly. Several developments in the immediate near term will serve as indicators. First, watch the IRGCN's posture in the strait itself. According to open-source ship tracking data from marine traffic and analysis from the Royal United Services Institute, IRGCN fast attack craft deployments to the northern strait approach corridor had returned to baseline levels by March 22nd. If that baseline holds through April, it suggests the operation achieved its deterrent objective. If harassment operations resume within 60 days, it suggests Tehran has absorbed the strike and recalculated that the cost of continued coercion remains acceptable. Second, watch Iran's air defense procurement signals. The destruction of the Abu Musa battery exposed a gap in Iran's ability to defend forward-positioned assets against standoff El-Rasim strikes. Tehran will seek to fill that gap, either through accelerated domestic development or through accelerated negotiations with Russia for S-400 system components, the transfer of which remains technically sanctioned but which Moscow has been willing to negotiate in the context of the broader Iran-Russia-China triangular relationship that has been deepening since 2022. The deeper question, the one that will not be answered in weeks but in years, is whether March 18th marks the beginning of a sustained American willingness to contest Iranian maritime coercion through direct kinetic action, or whether it represents a one-time demonstration designed to reset deterrence without establishing a new operating pattern. The distinction matters enormously. A sustained willingness to strike IRGCN assets when they conduct maritime coercion creates a fundamentally different strategic environment in the Gulf than a one-time demonstration. It transforms the cost calculus for every IRGCN operational planner permanently. It also transforms the political calculus for every Gulf state currently weighing the depth and reliability of the American security commitment. We are at the end of the slowly phase in the Strait of Hormuz. Whether the suddenly phase has already arrived or is still approaching may be much closer to resolution than the mainstream analysis currently acknowledges. China is watching this with the particular intensity of a nation that runs war game simulations about its own strait. The Taiwan Strait is not the Strait of Hormuz. The distances are different, the military geometry is different, the economic stakes are configured differently. But the core question that China's People's Liberation Army strategic planners are asking themselves this week is identical to the one Iranian planners are asking. Can our A2AD architecture survive a determined American decision to contest it with standoff precision weapons from outside our effective engagement envelope? The F-15EX operation over Abu Musa Island on March 18, 2026 did not answer that question for Beijing, but it raised the volume of the question considerably. Share your thoughts on this operation in the comments section below. Do you believe the March 18th strikes have genuinely reset Iranian deterrence, or will the IRGCN resume harassment operations before summer? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video so more people can follow these developments as they unfold. Iran had spent 4 years and $400 million building a maritime coercion machine designed to be too costly for the West to challenge. Two F-15EX aircraft dismantled its cornerstone installation in 11 minutes without entering Iranian airspace. The strait that Iran believed it had learned to control has been reminded that control in the Persian Gulf is never permanently purchased. Presented by TGN. Thank you for choosing us. Share content PDF.